Hi, everybody. We are in a magical space, in the magical space of the sound, in the sound recording studio named the Sensible Studio, and we will talk with the sound engineer that made this studio famous around the musical industry. So I'm very thrilled that I can talk with such a great professionist in this area. Hello, Mr. Jon Moon.
Hello.
I'm happy that I have the occasion to talk with you.
I'm happy to. Thank you.
You have a show online, I heard, no?
I do, yes. It's called The Moon Show.
The Moon
It's
Show.
on Islington Radio, which is available on Mixcloud.
Mm-hmm.
Just go on Mixcloud and search The Moon Show.
So you do that show when you are not busy or when you have some free time, or?
Yeah. Actually, I started it in lockdown. I think I just felt like I wanted to not just DJ some good tunes, but I wanted to share some of the stories from the studio. I wanted it to be, and it is, I think, about the music. And so I am choosing things that I feel run together in a musical way that's interesting for everybody. My musical taste is very broad, I would say. But I still enjoy the discovery of something new that makes me feel something, whatever it is, whether it's dancing or crying or laughing. So I took that notion and thought I'll make a radio show, and people who know me, close to me, have always said, "Oh, you've got a great voice for radio."
Yes, it's true. I listened a little from
great face for radio. Yeah.
And like they said, video kills the radio stars, but it's not the case. You look very well in video.
Well,
too.
the other way, yeah, maybe. So I just, it's a podcast, really, but Islington Radio, a community-based radio. Of course, we're on the board right in Islington here.
So I think for a sound engineer that is working with artists from pop music or rock music, you are searching a new territory, no? For new sound, for something that it's not like everywhere around, or something specific, something different.
Yes, I think it can be a bit like a bar of soap, because if you are specifically, yes, okay, one can shop around, so to speak, when looking for a new sound, but I think one has a duty to help bring that and create that sound, because sometimes by trying to create something that is the new sound, it doesn't, it sounds like you've tried, so I wouldn't put it quite like that, but certainly with the radio show, it was about sharing stories because sometimes I have guests who I've been working with, and I think through sharing that, I think the feedback is a positive one.
Mm-hmm.
So calmer, and so therefore the searching becomes a journey rather than a specific search.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when one feels that you're in a journey, whether it's going the way you want it to or not, is life. But I think everyone's I guess always looking for something new.
So can you tell me just a little about yourself? How you started in this industry?
Of course, it's quite a long story now.
I know, but
if I
just
was a
a
younger
little.
man, it would be a bit quicker. Although not really. When I was very young, I wanted to be James Bond, and I understood that meant being an actor, and that's what I wanted to be when I was a small child. And my mother, I grew up. My father wasn't musical, but my mum was with the Bach choir, which is a classical choir. They sung on with the Rolling Stones on "You Can't Always Get What You Want" is my mum's choir, and so I would, as I was growing up, I would experience concerts, classical concerts, and I was always very open to sound and the idea of being able to record it. And quite early on, I would use my mum's tape recorder and make mixtapes and cut things together, and you know, electronics. I remember as a small child taking my parents' gramophone to pieces just to understand how it worked. You know, the magic of a needle on the record was something I understood without having to. I just understood how that worked, like a plastic cup with a piece of string, or you know, and but I didn't understand how the radio worked. But I was fascinated by tuning the radio in and the speakers, you know, the physicality of the sound, and so yeah, that goes back a long time. So I mean, I was until I was about 12 or 13. I was at various drama schools, as well as proper school. That's the wrong thing to say, but you know what they thought was proper school, because of course this was not a career. When I was younger, this was like joining the circus. Going off on tour with a rock band would be, you know, you might as well run away with the circus. It wasn't a career. You know, now people study university and have certificates for this work, but that's not how it started for me at all. I think I just got a bit embarrassed being acting. I don't know. Something kicked in, and then music seemed to be the obvious way for me forward to express creatively. But even though I was very technical, because the technology was advancing very quickly in the 80s and 90s, you know, it was I was one of the forerunners of samplers and sampling, and I had one or two recording deals and a couple of releases under my own name, and then with a group after that. I worked in studios from about 16, 17 years old, and became part of the acid house movement, which was not really my musical scene at all. But I think the transition was made, really the spark for this, for engineering and producing, as it's called, was really because I was assigned to a production company, and they put me in the studio to make my own demos, and there was no engineer. It was just there you go, and I kind of knew what to do. I just looked at it. I thought, well, I know how that works, and just made a few demos on my own, and that's when actually, yeah, I can do this. And so it wasn't till a bit later on when I realised that actually I could start to pay my rent by having a regular job in studios and being employed to do that, rather than trying to make a hit record on my own.
So you started to learn. You have a formal education for this, or
No.
you just learned by yourself?
I've taught many people, But no exams, no being taught, although one is always learning along the way, and I've been very fortunate to blessed to work with some really excellent people in my field, and some amazing musicians, because really after all of that, the real influence is from the music, and the drive and the incentive is to make music. It's just, this is my instrument,
So you adapt to every musician, to every artist, or you have a special secret of the sound that you are
I think
making?
probably I do, yeah.
You do,
I
but
wish
you
I
don't
knew what
tell
it was.
it.
No, one can, obviously feel when something is flowing productively and musically, and I think they go hand in hand. I think
You agree always with the artist, or there were situations in which you were in conflict, or you were having different point of views about the sound or the...
Oh yeah, for sure. But then that's not an argument necessarily, although it can be. But it's always about the flow of a situation. I've worked with many different artists, ones that I knew as I was growing up, and been part of launching artists that everyone knows about now. So artist development and working for people like Pink Floyd.
Why they choose you and not somebody else? They have to have a reason.
I think it's also about quite a great deal of you make your own luck, or you make it usually work brings work. So I may do something for a project. In not every case am I in a position where I can argue with the artist about how the song is. That may not be the case. I may be just engineering and doing a specific job, in which case I wouldn't interfere unless I felt creatively I would be giving advice rather than telling someone what to do. It would be, perhaps we can try this, or we can do it like that, or just by talking about the process of recording it is a creative process. So just by talking about how we are going to record this drum kit, or how we want the end result to be.
So the work of a sound engineer is in the first place to record the instruments, to record the voice, if it is a voice, and then of course. To make the mix, to arrange all the channels.
And of course all of those parts of engineering come with different titles, but I find in my experience they are all combined. Production, mixing, recording, engineering, it is all one thing, really.
So you're doing everything.
I think producing also is a very broadly used title these days. A producer now is very much the creator. A producer back in the 70s per se may be someone who just sits at the back of the room, or just the person who books the musicians for the session, which is, in a way, it is producing it, because that is the definition of the title, I suppose, because if you're programming a beat on a computer, you're choosing the drum sounds. If you're the producer sitting back at the room choosing which musicians you're going to have play on your record, that is indeed producing. So they do cover a broad selection of all of those skills.
What was the most interesting project that you had until now?
Another good question. It's quite hard to pick out, because everything's has a different thing that's interesting. But I do immediately recall to mind when I'm working with Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, and I'm sound designer for the Dark Side of the Moon and the War tours, and I have delivered to me here all the original 2-inch master tapes from Pink Floyd. All these records I've been listening to growing up, I got to put on my tape machine and record into surround sound. Actually, it was changing it from quad into surround, and lifting off some samples, and like the lunatics in Dark Side of the Moon, and the clocks, and you know, different things. But you know, listening to original recordings of the songs that I've grown up playing guitar to and listening to, you know, yeah, that was a fascinating project. Yeah.
That was what I was hoping that you will remember exactly, because to choose from, I don't know, your children is very hard. But what you think about first, that is the one.
I think so, probably, yeah. From a technical point of view, that was really interesting, because you know, getting to really look back through the history books as they were recorded, you know, that's fascinating. The original master tapes, for me, that was like, wow, it's like opening a magic box, you know, and seeing how it was all put together. So it's kind of technical and creative interest there. Yeah.
I think for you it seems normal to work with such famous artists, but for the people that are watching us, is something very attractive. So how is to work with Celine Dion, with Michael Jackson, with
yes.
tell me.
Yes. Sometimes I do think that actually it's kind of unbelievable. I think, you know, as I was saying, quite early on, I was meeting or working with famous people, if you like, whether it be actors or there's a whole story behind my journey in terms of who I've worked with, but yeah, I guess I'm blessed in that sense. But I think it's more about being able to see the real source of creativity. You know, someone just being famous isn't really the thing. These people are famous because they're successful and really good at what they do. So I think I'm blessed by that. Yeah. I've forgotten what the original question was. Sorry.
I was asking how is to work with, and I asked you to remember.
It's exhilarating.
Some names of the people
and
that
exhilarating to work on any piece of music or art that then becomes well known. You know, I think, you know, I'm not famous myself, even though you could Google me, but I'm very much behind the scenes, and I think the actual reality of being famous is a bit of a nightmare, but it's also exhilarating, sorry, to you know, see people, feel people appreciate something you've done, you know, that way, or been part of doing. Yeah.
How do you stay updated with the new things in the industry of sound, with
very
softwares,
much so.
with
Yes, I do. I like what I like, and when it's reliable and I can rely upon it to do what I want, whether it's a piece of software or a piece of kit, you know, I will stick by its side. I won't just move on for the sake of it, but I very much am fascinated by what new products come out in that way. Yeah, Sure.
What do you think about the changes that took place in music, from the analog to the digital?
Yeah. Well,
It's
for
a
me, on a
big
professional,
change. It's good or not so good, or
all of those things. I don't think you can say it's not good, but I mean, obviously, I miss holding a record sleeve and reading the lyrics on the inner cover. You know, I miss doing that when I'm listening to music, because I often want to know who played drums and who mixed it and who, you know, I want to know those details. So when I'm imagining it and listening to it, I can, I don't know, it's a fascinating thing, isn't it? Because, you know, it's a work of art that you can't touch. But in the technical side of things, as we're talking about that in that way, the analog, I used to sit for 24 hours in a studio with a mix on analog tape, cutting out bass drums, reversing them, and then gluing them back into the tape. You know, tiny bits of tape with milliseconds on them. The time it took just to rewind a tape machine back in the old days, and yes, you can drop in, but you can't loop. I mean, you can make the tape machine loop. You can. We did a lot, but it was a lot more physical effort in the analog days to achieve a result today at the push of a button. So I think there was it's part of the creative process, it was, but at the same time now, because I sat there for nights on end with bits of tape round my neck, I'm now fast as light on editing, which really helps with the creative process today, when one can edit and comp and perform production and engineering techniques on the fly, so that it doesn't disturb the creative process. But then on the other hand, if you were delivering a vocal and you had to wait a few moments for the tape to rewind before you could do your next take, it gives you a bit of mental space to think about your next take. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I'm trying to get the same word or the same line or a high note, these days we just go round and loop, 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 loop. No. There's a time, you know, even though we can just play instantly, we don't need to. That time of mind space to prepare for that incoming next take is quite crucial. And some of the analog recording techniques that were necessary in the beginning because of the technology, now one tends to adjust the flow to emulate that creative period, seconds perhaps, between takes, or to set up a live performance so that it feels like it's analog. But then on the other hand, also with electronics, I'm a big fan of electronics and robots making music, yeah. But no, I've always been a fan of the electronics trying to be human as much as we're trying to be automated about everything, and there's massive advantages behind what we can do now. So I'm a user and a believer of where we are technologically, but there are certain elements that I miss about the old days, you know. But yeah, I think all in all, technologically, with the software and everything else, with a good combination and a good perspective on what one is doing, a much better result can be found.
But in terms of the income for the music, the internet was
well, that's the business
bedrock
of it rather than the creative process. But yeah, that's difficult to see an answer to that one. I mean, until people actually pay for music. I mean, obviously people will pay and do pay more than an album. You know, £100 for a concert ticket is quite cheap, I think. But that's like the only time they won't have necessarily even bought the album of the artist. They just listen for free. And the revenue streams that come from it's an age-old thing to say, but Spotify and some are a bit more conscious than others, but the model itself, that money does not make it. And even if you do, my royalties from records that I have made, whereas a point would be 1% back in the day of record sales, that equates to 99p point 0.01 of a pence, hundredth of a penny per play. That's so you have to have 100 plays before you've made 1 penny. Oh, where there is no, the bottom's gone. There's no.
Do you think that we need regulations for the internet?
No, I don't think you can. I don't think you can. Of course, no. I think people should pay for music if you like it. Obviously, I don't think it should be extortionate. I thought the 99p on iTunes to buy is good, but then I pay my $10.99 on Apple Music now, and I listen to unlimited songs, and I'm glad for that. So it's a bit hypocritical, but at the same time, in my profession, while the revenue is a fraction of what it was, I'm also in a service industry whereby this is a recording studio. We make records. You still need a record for someone to come and know about you, to come and pay £100 for your concert ticket, for example. If there's no record, they wouldn't hear that. So there's still a business in what I do, for sure. But yeah, it's hard, and for the artist particularly as well, because unless you really are a big famous artist worldwide selling, it's it can be tough.
And about the artificial intelligence, do you think that they can?
Very good question. I was at
mix
recently
music, for example.
Well, yeah, it can, and it does. And but you can't ban it. No one's gonna ban it. You can't stop it. Cloning. They tried to ban cloning. Anyway, that's a different subject. At first, when I think about AI in music, I just think, oh, it's all just going to be like TikTok. But actually, there's an album by the Jonas Brothers that's recently come out, and it's a very good album, really well done. I really highly respect them. But while I heard a couple of tracks from it, for example, it sounded so much like something I knew, that I've heard before. Sometimes I do get that feeling when I hear a record for the first time, and I feel like I've heard it in the future. Oh yeah, this song, here it is, it's come. But I can recognize in music today where there is parts of, and this happens, and this is very important, because this happens naturally when organically one is writing a song. A lot of music originally came from the original music. The Beatles, for example, in the 60s, or whenever you're growing up, when you start to write songs, there are going to be influences in your head. And so therefore, you're doing what the AI software is doing. So the AI software, for example, I could say to it, make it like Roxy Music, Love is the Drug, mixed with Kylie Minogue, mixed with Bach. Oh, and then give me a lyric that goes something like, she holds the sun. And it gives you something back. I think that's a tool. And I think used by a creative entity, it can be a really productive, a magical thing. But I think positively most in it with a very creative user. You know, you could be an advertising executive and you want a song for your new drink, so you put in the words Coca-Cola, you get the Beach Boys, you know, song, do you know what I mean? Feed it all into the software and it comes out with a commercial tune for your new fizzy drink, you know. That's where it may become detrimental to songwriters and the creative industry, because it'll become blurred in a way, what is real and what isn't. But even that, for me, is fascinating, when to find, like, is that real? And we also emulate computers ourselves, so there's a whole area there which is, you could go, that's terrible. Yeah, it could be really awful, but at the same time, the moment you notice it's really awful, it could turn it around into a creative thought. So, yeah, that was a long-winded answer. Sorry. Yeah, so I think I'm interested to see where it takes us.
I'm interested too, but I think the great artist or big artist will prefer to work with a person, with an engineer, not with the artificial intelligence, to mix their music, because...
Of course, but you couldn't use in artificial intelligence in that way. It couldn't be done in that way. You'd have to just take the multi-track of the song, feed it into the computer and see what came out.
Yeah.
But you could put in there parameters like make a pop mix, make a disco mix, make a, you know... I'm interested to see that too, because I believe that the human intervention, even if it were me programming the software, so you might not get a satisfactory result unless you use an engineer, because the detail in mixing particular types or any types of mixing, the detail required needs a human to make those decisions. I'm still interested though.
And one last question.
Yes.
What do you think about the music in the theater? When you go to a play?
I mean, that's my first experience, of course. Yes, I love that. What do I think about it? What, in terms of...
What do you think it's important, or...
yeah, of course. As important as in film.
It's a very special to work in the theater as a sound engineer?
I have done. I think the repetition of a performance that isn't necessarily a musical performance, because musical performances, even though they may be the same every night, they're not going to be exactly the same. It's not a spoken piece where a script is spoken a certain way every night, you know. I mean, cool, that's very broad. But in terms of music, in theatre, I support it greatly and think it's as important as music in film.
It's important for the atmosphere of the play, or for the artists, or for the public, or
delivering the story in every way.
So you participate as a creator in in making the music for a theatre play?
I have done. Yes.
So you are not just an executive.
No. I've played on a lot of the records I made, but I've also played in theatre. But I have also done a few movie and TV series soundtracks. So creating pieces of music that work with what's going on stage, if you like, on screen. Is also a very interesting creative process. Yeah, I mean,
because at the theater you have to adapt to the stage, so you have to know some signs to put the sound that is needed at that moment.
Yes,
for example,
like
so you
time
have to
code
be
in film
all the time in action.
Yeah. Like in a movie, you have time code, which is the grid upon which things need to Yeah.
And it's not.
I love the synchronization of it all.
Yeah.
The synchronization of the piece with the music and the action, as you call it.
So every night
harmony.
is different. You cannot be bored. I repeat every night the same things. And
it depends on the production, doesn't it? I suppose.
Okay. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.